For it to affect my husband or possibly my children, that made me sad. Hi, I'm Valerie Tsai. I'm originally from the Bay Area and have been living in Taipei for about 4.5 years. My parents are from Taiwan, Taipei, and the other Qingzhou. They moved to the States when they were about 20 and attended college. Dad is a robotic engineer, and my mom, she runs her own business, well, not anymore, she retired, distributor of tools throughout the Midwest.
Do you feel like that they tried to raise you more like in a Taiwanese fashion or more of an American?
Sometimes they would be speaking Taiwanese when they didn't want us to understand anything. Some Taiwanese values were taught to us, so we needed to be 孝顺, listen to our parents. But the thing I remember most is my mom wanting us to be independent, strong individuals with a focus on education, earning our own money, and speaking our minds. Yeah, you know, growing up in the Midwest, I was probably one of 3 or 4 people in my school that were Asian.
Wow.
But you know, my mom was a very strong figure in our community that left a lasting impression on me of how brave and strong we can be as Asians, even though we were the minority. It didn't make me feel like, oh, I need to be quiet or feel any negative aspect to it. So freshman year, I actually went to University of Michigan. My mom actually really wanted me to try for Wharton, and I got in, and it was the best decision. I love Penn, love Wharton. It really just gave me so much confidence to reach my potential, being an entrepreneur or learning how to manage people, learning how you can make an impact on the world. And it gave me more appreciation for my roots as an Asian person, as a Taiwanese person, and that has set the stage of who I am today.
Do you feel like going to an Ivy League school like that afforded you certain benefits?
I mean, there's definitely a leg up in the beginning. So you might have access to interviews at prestigious firms. But in the long run, any job or what you do is dependent on who you are and what you have to offer. And that you can gain anywhere. As
an Asian American, sometimes people are pigeonholing you to do certain jobs.
I didn't feel pigeonholed. Maybe from my parents.
Yeah.
You know, like finance, I shouldn't have chosen that. I should have chosen marketing. You know, it's really funny, and I don't know if my mom would like me saying, but when I first transferred to Wharton, my parents were like, oh, you should also double in biochemistry. I just was overwhelmed, and I called my parents and I was like, I can't do this, this is too much, I don't want to. Yeah. And they immediately were like, forget it. And like I said, my family were very open, and they quickly realized that that was not my calling.
Did they get Dee Dee to do it?
No, they realized that they really need to get to know each child and respect that.
And then after you graduated?
I worked at Merrill. I didn't like finance. Got a job at a PR firm in Singapore. From there, I moved back to the Bay Area, worked at Cisco. After that, I got married, had kids, and became a full-time mother, and then we moved here.
Had the country changed at all in your impression from when you were a kid?
You know, growing up, I spent a lot of time at 我的阿嬷家 or 我奶奶家, and their homes are very traditional. Actually, my father grew up in a very poor setting. My mother, similar. That's kind of what, in my memories of what Taiwan is like. I'm not sure underdeveloped is the right word, but sometimes it brings me to tears just hearing their stories, because my dad would say his parents were so busy trying to make a living. His older sister would have to take care of him, and she was maybe like 5 years old. It blows my mind how far my parents have come from that setting to being successful business owners or engineers.
How did that even happen?
Scholarships. My dad is really bright, really smart, and it was through scholarships and studying really hard that he was able to move to the States, get an education. From there, landed a job at Fanuc, which is one of the leading robotic companies in the world. Worked up the ranks to become, basically led the R&D team. He did really well for himself, all through just hard work.
Yeah.
And the same for my mom. My mom, similarly, poor setting, and paid her way through college, got an entry-level job at this distribution firm, worked her way to become president and then owner. And then she became really involved in different organizations that promoted women in business, promoted Taiwan and US economic ties. They set a really good example for me and my siblings to be independent, strong, and also make an impact on their community.
Wow, it's inspiring.
They worked really hard. A lot of respect for my parents.
You guys came back because of COVID?
Yes. Yes.
And then you guys decided to stay, though.
Yeah, we loved it. We absolutely loved it. The food, the friends, the people. One of the things I love about Taiwan is that there's so much support for young families, young kids, babies, toddlers. I mean, they have these play centers in every district. In the language, I want my children to learn Mandarin. Having grown up in the States and going to Chinese school every weekend, my Chinese is still terrible. It's still like first grade level.
Have there been any instances where you're like, oh, raising children here is different than in the States?
Yeah, a lot. When I first sent Toby, and this is different from the school he goes to now, the teacher mentioned, oh, your son asks a lot of questions. And teachers had previously in the States, they had mentioned that, but in like a positive way, like, oh, he's so curious. But here was more like, oh, he asks a lot of questions. So it caught me off guard because like in my mind, I'm like, isn't that a good thing? But I quickly realized that might be the culture here.
Yeah, I was going to ask, has that openness and assertiveness and confidence that you've taken from the States, does that sometimes act against your interests here? Or like?
Oh, it totally doesn't suit me well here. There was an instance as it relates to my child's extracurricular. I noticed that the way they were teaching the kids wasn't in the best interest of all the kids. Things like preferential treatment that inadvertently led to bullying that was ignored by management. I was really confused as to why parents would be okay with that. But as I was speaking to the families individually, I learned that actually they weren't okay with it and nothing was done. So I did my research to educate myself more about this extracurricular. I sent all the information that I learned to all the parents and to the management team because in the Bay Area, I'm really used to parents and teachers being collaborative to positive and negative feedback. After so many parents individually messaged me or talked to me in person and said, I'm so glad you brought this up. I'm so glad someone had the guts to bring this. I didn't even think it was gutsy, to be honest, but they said that. And they also said, can you also bring up this and that, but keep me anonymous? That was shocking to me that they were scared to voice their opinions because my education and training is you don't just follow a process for the sake of following it. If the process doesn't make sense, you question it and you try to come up with solutions that is better. And so I did want to make a difference. And so I was active on my socials. I did post examples of myself speaking up because I wanted to encourage that behavior. Being an expat, it didn't register for me about the issue with mianzi, being mafan. They are not used to people questioning them to that level. For me to raise it where it's more public, that kind of pressure they were not happy with.
So in the States, maybe it'd be like, oh, this parent is bringing an issue. This is a room for growth.
Exactly.
Or here it's like, oh, this person's bringing an issue. They're trying to make me look incompetent.
Yes. You know, on the surface, the management seemed to be open to feedback, but shortly thereafter, I experienced unethical retaliation. So I was ghosted, outcasted from society, essentially. People who I thought were friends no longer wanted to be associated with me. They even told their husbands no longer to hang out with my husband. That's probably what pained me the most. Sorry, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it.
Yeah, it's got to be painful to lose your friends over this.
It was painful to lose my friend, but probably more painful that it affected my husband, because I can handle myself. I'm a strong person, but for it to affect my husband or possibly my children, that made me sad. And I was really devastated for a good few months. And there were days where I just would spend all day in bed and knew from experience I had to go seek help. And that's where I learned more about adult bullying. You know, it was surprising to have to experience this as an adult, because usually this is something you experience in middle school, high school.
So this never happened to you in like the corporate world over?
No, but I know recently in Taiwan they had that issue in the corporate world. So it is relevant. It's happening to adults. People here are hesitant to dive into conflict resolution. They are uncomfortable to have that uncomfortable conversation, which could have clarified a lot of misunderstandings and which could have prevented bullying from happening. It's so different from the way I was raised, and especially at Wharton. I vividly recall an interview I went to with one of the consulting firms where after the interview, the consultant was like, great interview, but I want to give you some feedback. So direct, for the purpose of just helping one another become better as individuals, better at interviewing. Even actually in Singapore, very direct feedback. It was hard and it was eye-opening to experience the opposite here.
Some people might be like, well, if you don't like it, just go back to the States.
Yeah, I think it was just that one experience that was tough for me. But in general, I love Taiwan. My family was raised in always making an impact in the community that you're in. And I will always try my best to do that. But I need to learn how to be more tacit in terms of how I communicate that. You know, there was this experience I had at Cisco where we had a project. And before the big presentation, he held individual meetings with key stakeholders to get their buy-in. That might have been a better way of approaching it. Individual meetings with maybe smaller groups to get their buy-in so that there's less of that 面子 issue.
Because of this experience, are you kind of more hesitant to speak your mind because you know you're in Taiwan now?
No. I want my son to see me stand up. I want him to learn that when there is a problem, you come together as a team to find a solution. It's worth speaking your mind to make change for the better. But I need to learn how to respect their cultures and learn how to navigate the differences. But I would never sacrifice or change my personality. I do think it's important to bring awareness to the larger societal issues here. Fear of speaking one's mind, bottling up one's emotions because you can't express it. How does that impact one's mental health? In the Bay Area, everyone I know has a therapist. They're like, oh, my usual Wednesdays. There's a mentality that just as you exercise for your physical health, going to a counselor, seeing a therapist is your exercise for your mind. My husband and I are always very vocal that we have our own therapist. We've even seen marriage counselors, which has been wonderful for our relationship. So I am now working on curating a gallery, bring awareness to the benefits of counseling, break the stigma on mental health. I've noticed that so many have bottled up their emotions and struggles because there's pressure from family, from society to not seek help for their struggles. You would be deemed 神经病. It would bring embarrassment, that 面子, to the family. And there's that expectation that you deal with struggles silently. Be strong enough, just deal with it. So people don't seek help. It's really unfortunate because for me, it was life-saving. And it was because of meeting so many people that had gone through similar issues that the idea of the Through My Eyes Gallery was born. It's open to anyone across Taiwan to share anonymous pieces that speak to their struggles with societal and family pressure. And by sharing these raw, unfiltered stories, their emotions, their thoughts, can people really see the real picture of what's going on in society. Silence really encourages just a lack of conflict resolution. Instead of going in to talk to the person directly to tackle the situation at hand, they just avoid. That can snowball into bigger issues like exclusion and bullying and
ghosting people, right. Shunning people.
Yeah. Conflict resolution is not about causing issues. It's about making things better for everyone involved. If we can have conversations about that now, then maybe we can create a future where people feel less alone and don't need to struggle in silence. I do think it's important for me to learn the culture here, respecting it, but at the same time trying to contribute. Because I do believe that it's important to speak one's mind. How else would organizations and the community change for the better? If you're silent the entire time, it's always going to be what it was 20 years ago. Is that what you want for Taiwan?